Okay, today I'm looking at Victor Victrola the 6th, 595357, 1921 in oak. This is not one of my machines. This belongs to Lynette, and she bought this at an antique store. And this machine had what I like to call a flea market rebuild. In short, what that means is you find a fairly decent machine in an attic or wherever. It doesn't have any major wood issues, just dirty, and it's been sitting a long, long time. So you wipe down the wooden cabinet with some furniture polish, and maybe you hose down the motor with some WD-40, and that is, occasionally you'll find them with a new felt has been applied, and somebody threw some gaskets into the reproducer, usually not correctly. So that is a flea market rebuild. And the machine is then sold as, it plays, it works, it plays a record. You'll hear some scratchy record being played on it. Sounds terrible because the reproducer wasn't done right and all that. But they look decent. If all you want is something to display on a shelf and the price is reasonable, why not? But oftentimes these are sold at serviced machine prices. You know, an average Victrola the 6th in as-found condition, it's a $100 machine, $125 maybe. You know, for a decent one, everything's there. Crank, reproducer, it's all there, just needs to be fully serviced and reproducer rebuilt, motor cleaned, all of that kind of thing. After they've been serviced, which can be, when done properly, is a time-consuming job, and dirty. You're going to get grease all over yourself, springs have to come out, there are two of them in this, excuse me, then you're looking at closer to $325, $350, because it is a lot of work. Depends on where you send it, and you know, all of that. Some shops charge more than others, and you know, you'll end up paying. It's a lot of work to do, like I said. Now, with these machines have two 9-foot springs in them, about the smallest double spring motor, same exact motor that you're going to find in the big Victrola 9. Only difference is the size of the springs. With a Victrola 9 or the floor models, you're going to get a 17-foot spring, two of them. With this, you're going to get 9-foot spring. With Victor, the more money you spent, the bigger the springs you got and more of them. There's a little trick that I like to do with any 6 that I'm keeping for myself, where it doesn't matter if I spend more money than I should on it. I will remove the 9-foot springs, and I will put 17-foot springs in them, either a nice used pair or brand new ones. Because I'm lazy and don't feel like cranking the machine after every record, which usually you should with these small springs they put in these things. But that's only for machines that I'm keeping for myself, not ones I'm building to sell or I'm redoing for someone else where I don't have an unlimited budget. So this has the original 9-foot springs. They're perfectly good. There's nothing wrong with them. They work just fine. And the motor, it needed the usual scrub down. The springs hadn't been removed. Actually, the springs were dry. I'm sorry, and this is the one. The springs were dry because one of the springs, I guess, had broken at some point, and it was replaced, and they did not put lubrication into the barrel. Being 1921, this has one spring barrel with 2 springs inside. That was so-called improved motor. So, you know, that's not good. It was thumping and bumping so bad, I assumed a dirty, filthy spring with 100-year-old grease, when in fact it was a nice set of springs with no grease at all. And it is a 9-foot spring. They didn't put like a 12-foot or a 17-foot spring in there with a 9-foot or anything like that. That much they did right. They just didn't lubricate it. And they didn't clean the rest of the motor. I mean, why? If you're going to take the motor out and apart to do a spring job, clean it. It's not that hard to do. Anyway, that's all been done. You know, the governor's been put to rights, and a few other little issues we found in there had to be dealt with. The cabinet was already in good shape. I didn't do anything to that. The exhibition reproducer, oh boy, did we have some fun with that. They just threw gaskets in it any old way and called it good. Now the exhibition, there it is. This has a very tight-fitting mica diaphragm in it. There's a very, very small amount of room between that diaphragm and the metal of the body. And you have to space that out very carefully, because if that diaphragm touches the metal of the body, you're going to get a nasty buzz. It's not going to sound very good at all. And this very often is something that a first-time rebuilder doesn't realize. especially if they're doing a flea market rebuild. This is not something they do for pleasure or really care that much about. They just want to sell the machine, so they're throwing it back together and calling it good. We can't do that. Now, the space between that diaphragm and this body is about the space of a business card, which is exactly what I used as spacers when I put them in there. When I glue your little dab, what you do is you put the first gasket in, you drop the diaphragm on top of 4 little dabs. You see, on the gasket, you put 4 little dabs of clear nail polish, you drop the diaphragm in there, and then you use that business card stock to shim it around before the nail polish dries, and it dries quick. You put that in there. Now you know that diaphragm is not touching the wall of the reproducer. And then when the nail polish dries, carefully remove the shims, put the second gasket in, seal it up, done. That had not been done properly, and yes, it was touching. There was also some issues with the diaphragm itself. It was a new diaphragm, but they screwed it up. You know, they didn't line up the needle bar properly, and they tried to force it in there, and it's kind of split in there. Not good. You can't have that. So we had to go with a brand new reproducer in it. In fact, the entire thing had to be done. Everything. I even had to recut the gaskets because they left too much of an air gap in there. They cut them too loose so that there was a gap in there. You don't want that. You want them a little bit tight, even to the point where they want to spring out a little bit when you're sticking them in there, so that the ends stay squeezed together and you don't get an air leak there. And it didn't end there. You think it would, but it didn't end there. I found, and this has nothing to do with the rebuild, but the needle hole up here, it's a triangular hole in this one, for the needle, was actually so worn on the side where the needle, opposite the thumb screw where the needle rests, it was so worn in there that the needle refused to sit straight. It just wouldn't. It was impossible to get it. It was just, instead of having a nice triangular, shape in there, it was like rounded. It's done. I tried various fixes on that. None of them worked. It had a new isolator gasket. That's always has to be replaced because they're never any good. After 100 years, they fall apart. That was okay. And I ended up having to replace the entire, everything. Everything had to be done. And that's typical flea market rebuild. This is the one area that those people doing that sort of thing just don't know anything about. And they're not going to send it out to someone because that's going to cost too much money. They're going to buy the minimal kit, throw it in there, and call it good. So that's corrected. Everything else is good now. It's playing. And I have it set up, and you're probably wondering why there's black tape around the edge of the turntable. Well, that's simple. I'm trying out new technology. I have this device, a digital meter. A digital meter, it's a tack meter basically. Instead of using a stroboscope disc to set the speed on this, I'm going to use this. And it does work surprisingly well. The only thing is it won't work on a reflective surface. So what you have to do is cover the surface, and then let's turn that a little bit until I could find where there we go. They give you this reflective tape you put on there that reflects the laser beam coming out of this. That's how it sets, the tack. And it's it's barely close, about as close as the stroboscope's going to get you. With this machine, you're always going to be setting the speed, because you have a simple knob. You touch that knob and it's off. And to check it, you always have to check it. So you do have to get a stroboscope disc. When you own one of these, stroboscope discs work with a 60 cycle bulb. That's the old incandescent light bulb you see up there. The only reason why I still have them, not LED, not fluorescent. The pulses on those are a little different. You need that old 60 cycle bulb, or one of these, this is like $11 on eBay with free shipping. Maybe $1 or $2, whatever it was for tax. And it does seem to work. So they're around, but the only thing is, with a Victrola, because of that nickel-plated strip, around there, you do have to put some black tape on it first, and before you put your reflective tape on. Let's try it and see. And I'll show you how this works. Okay. First, let's spin her up. Get it up to speed. Now, hit test. When your red dot, let's do that, is there, we are spinning at 76.3. No, I'm sorry, 78.2. 78.3. That's pretty close. That's as close as you're going to get, really. Look at that, perfect. So much easier than screwing around with a stroboscope disc, and you don't have to worry about having the 60 cycle bulb. But you do have to play with tape a little bit. And there it is. I mean, at this point, I know these records well enough. I could do it by ear pretty much, but I like to know for sure. But if you have a machine like this, it's got the simple knob, and it doesn't have a dial where it's, and even those you do occasionally have to check with a stroboscope disc to make sure they're still in spec. When your friction leather wears a little bit, it's going to start changing its speed. You always have to check them. So if you have one of these simple knob jobs like on a 4, a 6, Victrola 6, or a Victrola 50, Victrola 35, stuff like that, you do need to have some means of checking your speed. So Lynette, get a stroboscope disc or one of these meters and do what I just did there. This will work on any phonograph, not just this one. All this does, it's your tachometer. I mean, you're checking your speed, that's all. That's all this does. Okay, now, let's crank it back up to where it should be. And we will play a record. It's a long, long way to Tipperary by the American Quartet. New needle is on there, and remember, always change your needle for each play.
Singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square, till Paddy got excited, then he shouted to them there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know in Tipperary. So it's goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. Paddy wrote a letter to his Irish Molly-o, saying, should you not receive it, write and let me know. If I make mistakes in spelling, Molly dear, said he, remember it's the pen that's bad, don't lay the blame on me. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know in Tipperary. So it's goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know in Tipperary. So it's goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.
And there we go. We'll play side B. Let's see, side B on this was what? I forget. Soldiers of the King March. Nice oak machine, this one. Now, what was bad is I know Lynette was charged a serviced machine price for this when she bought it. Now, maybe the antique dealer didn't really understand. A lot of these guys that sell these machines, they don't know anything about them. They don't understand what has to be done to them to make them function properly. You know, they just an old phonograph to them. They don't know. They're not hobbyists. So I'm sure in the seller's mind, it looked good, it was good. But really, for collectors, we want to play these machines. We don't really care. You know, we want something that looks good on the shelf. We want something that plays good too. And if you're going to charge somebody for a machine, you know, the price of a machine that's been serviced, it should have been serviced. It wasn't. But it is now. And let's get rid of that old needle. Always change the needles. I know I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more. Because needles are not expensive. You can buy them by the 100-pack from dozens of dealers on eBay and elsewhere, while these records are irreplaceable. When they're done, they're done. And the quickest way to destroy them is to keep using old worn needles to play them, other than literally dropping them on the floor and shattering them. Oh, I did that already, right? Did I crank it? Talking and I forgot. I did. Okay. Soldiers of the King March. And there we go. Soldiers of the King March. Sorry about the phone ringing in the background. The only time anybody ever needs to get a hold of me is when I'm making a video, apparently. Okay. Get rid of that old needle right off so we're not tempted to use it again. All right. That is Lynette's Victrola the 6th, 1921. Playing once again. Now, this is just for Lynette, this part. When it comes to you, this back arm here, this assembly that's held on with 4 screws, see them? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 flat plate screws. This is not going to be attached to the box. Never ship one of these machines with the arm attached because it could get broken. Especially, you can get away with it with the 4 sometimes because they're smaller and they don't take the same arm actually, but they don't take up as much room in the box. But we're going to disconnect this, and here, this part is important. The reproducer, it rotates like that. See how that rotates? Make sure it's always at a 45-degree angle, where you turn it like that until it stops turning, and then you wiggle it off. Easier said than done, because they're on there a little tight. Just shake it back and forth a little bit, and it comes right off. And now to put it back on, you slide it into the slot, and rotate it. That's it. And it's done. Because it's going to come without the reproducer on there. That's going to be shipped in a separate box. Okay. There we go.